board and all that good stuff. And then finally, we'll have a Q&A. Nick's going to be handling the Q&A, and he'll bring that up throughout. So Nick, feel free to jump in. Matt and I always want this as collaborative and as interactive as possible. So if you have a question, I would encourage you to chat, use the chat function to talk amongst yourselves, or just bring it to Nick's attention and say, I'd love to have Matt or John address this. So we've got a lot of slides. We'll move quickly through stuff if we feel like we can, but we're more than happy to slow down and take a minute to talk about something. We've got a pretty diverse group, I suspect, but so we'll just kind of roll with it. So next slide.
Yeah. So just John, before I move on to the next slide, I want to reiterate that we want to keep this interactive, and we're going to take some stops. And we're going to ask you to provide your thoughts and your questions. So ask questions throughout this webinar, but also provide your thoughts and let us know what you're doing, what's working for you on this different subject material. And again, we're gonna stop occasionally and have you provide, as the audience, provide some comments and questions. The other thing is that I just in this day and age, I always have to add that we're all at home, and there might be bandwidth problems here and there. There could be dogs barking in the background, kids yelling, spouses yelling at the kids, things like that. So just bear with us through this, and hopefully the plan is you'll take away some good things that you can use now and in the future.
Okay, so the elephant in the room, or the virus in the room, hopefully not the virus in the room, is COVID. We're all dealing with it. It is difficult, it is challenging. And so it really makes everyone stop and think, what's happening with fundraising? And so this culture of philanthropy training, I think it still applies very much. And when Matt and I talked with Amber originally, and then Nick, certainly we said so much of this stuff applies, but we can't move forward without addressing some obvious effects of COVID's having on folks. So I just want to quickly roll through some of these. Let's say you had a new building, a new space opening. Well, it's virtual now. Let's say you had dinners, lunches, runs, anything else. They are either canceled or they're virtual. New initiatives. You might use this opportunity to actually put some fundraising behind new initiatives. Let's say it was an initiative for your school to become more digital. Well, there couldn't be a better time of at least planting the seeds for that process to move forward. Now, I'd probably say, maybe not an ask taking place, although that could happen, but you can easily get the internal dynamics, the messaging, and all that. And then I'll jump quickly. I won't read the slide to you because there's a lot of stuff here. But one thing I'd want to point out is, professional development, sharpening the skills. This is something that everyone faces, and it's, how to become more astute on this, that, or the other. Well, now is a great opportunity. There's so much information out there, a lot of good material, a lot of good stuff for you to find out what am I missing, or what I need to learn more about. So I would encourage you. And then the last part is partnerships. We really don't run into any nonprofit institution, school that doesn't have a partnership with another entity. And this is a great time to not build walls between, but instead increase the communication, because everybody's in the same boat. Everybody's dealing with it. And whether it's a large organization, if you feel like you have a partnership with a large organization, they might have shared resources, or you might be able to do something more nimble than they cannot do, and they'll appreciate you doing that. So the last part of this, how COVID changes things, I would just emphasize this part, that really think about your partnerships, keep the lines of communication open, and find out where there's really some mutual benefit. All right, next slide. All right, culture of philanthropy. It's really about increasing the donor investment. And when we talk about investments, it's certainly can be funds, but it's also going to be time commitment. It's going to be their mental energy. It's going to be their feeling that they're part of your institution, your nonprofit, your school. And it's a better experience. There's a difference between somebody making $1,000 gift and a $100,000 gift, or even a $50 gift to a $500 gift. And then finally, meeting the mission and vision. Talking to donor really, and this can be boiled down to a lot of ways. Over the years, Matt has too, and so many really great fundraisers I've worked with, it boils down to this question of having an opportunity to say, why do you support us? And finding out what why that support is and enhance the mission. Stronger internal partnerships. This is another really great element of cultural philanthropy. If you develop that relationship with that enrollment director, or that program officer, or that field person, or that higher up, or that frontline, person, that's going to enhance. They're going to find out what fundraising really is and what's not. It's not arm twisting. It is, in fact, building genuine relationships. It's more efficient and more effective. There's one thing that Matt and I talk about a lot, and MPW we talk about, is becoming more efficient. And don't put on a big event if it's not necessary, or don't do this big stewardship if it's not necessary. Instead, find out what this donor really wants. And she may be interested in implementing this program, and it has nothing to do with all this stuff around that you presuppose you should do. And then finally, less frustration. Organizations need to run in sync. There has to be trust and understanding. Understanding comes from building a culture, this culture of philanthropy, of what fundraising is and what's not. Okay, Matt, next slide. Okay, so when you build a culture of philanthropy, these are kind of some fun graphics, but basically it is organization, they're become donor-centric. And donor-centric is a term a lot of folks use, and it's a good term to use because it always starts with, what does the donor feel? What's the donor going to feel? And it's no different from business. What's the customer feel? And so keep that in mind. When you adopt it, you engage donors in so many ways that you're going to see this upward trend. So the next bar is seeing this efficiency, this effectiveness. So maybe somebody increases the size of their gift, or maybe they make a bequest intention, or maybe they do a gift in kind or a service or something. And then finally, you're going to reach the pinnacle of your organization's, I shouldn't say the pinnacle. You're going to reach your organization's goals a lot faster by involving everybody, because you're going to get the synergy where the team, the nonprofit team works together. And so all this, is a pitch to say culture of philanthropy is very serious, very real, and something you should do. Never treat it as something on the side. It really should be baked into everything you do. Okay, and I just want to make sure that Nick, if we have any questions coming up, I just want to make sure. I know we will have time for that. But I'd like to hear, and if people would mind typing in on the chat of, what do you want out of this session? Now that I've given you kind of an overview, and Matt's going to be talking more about it, is what are you hoping to achieve? More along the steps, or is it more just to get an overview? So I'd love to have people chat in and make comments there.
Again, everyone, it's in that bottom right-hand corner. Feel free to type into that chat function, and I will definitely go ahead and relay anything that's typed in there.
Yeah, so we'll take just a minute or two. If you can chat that in, that'd be great.
Looks like we have some coming through. Some ideas, steps for building that culture in our organization. I'm just looking for an overview, new to development. Steps to really engage our colleagues in our work. And especially in these crazy times, how to convince people that fundraising is the key revenue generator versus pivoting all our programs. So a handful have come through.
Well, I'll start off by saying, and I've been through a number of recessions, a number of crises, and one thing I've learned is this is kind of the business world, but you don't cut your sales staff during crisis, and you're not going to be able to fulfill your mission if you stop engaging donors. Because if you really want to help folks, you need to be sustainable, and we need to start thinking about what's going to happen in the fall and the spring. So I would make the argument that now more than ever, we need to be engaged with volunteers. Maybe not asking, but at least checking in on them. And I would say overwhelmingly positive responses I've heard from clients, from other folks. I've been on a lot of group meetings about where donors are. And I have yet to hear donors or situations where it's really been a bad experience where development staff have reached out and they've received a negative pushback. I don't know, Matt, have you heard anything?
Sorry, Okay, good. Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to go into this, but when you look at philanthropy is, it's actually our next slide. But in this slide, we always ask our audience, what does philanthropy mean to you? But I think at this time, it's really about, this feeling and this involvement and being involved. And that's so important right now because, with social distancing, people are at home. But I think a lot of people are really want to be involved and connected. And by giving, that's a great way. And as everybody, as you probably know, through giving, it creates a great feeling. So I think giving people the opportunity to give is actually very important now. And they probably give to your organization. They probably love your organization. And to have that opportunity to make your organization stronger, or help your organization just get through this time, and provide the resources for your organization to make impact on the people that it serves is just absolutely critical right now. So we highly encourage philanthropy and donor engagement to continue. Not everybody's in a place where they can give, of course, but there are people that probably may not give as much as they used to, but every dollar counts, right? And everybody should be involved and have that opportunity to give. And that's kind of a place I think that you should come from, and we'll provide a little more context around that in this presentation.
Yeah, and we'll certainly jump into the steps. When I'm done with my section, Matt will jump into the second step. And I won't spend too much time on the slide. There is great. It's a good segue. What philanthropy is. There's a lot of different words attached to it. So think of it very broad. And when you reach out to donors and have these conversations, treat it, the first rule of thumb is it's a relationship. And just treat it that way. Don't treat it as transactional, and you'll find it people want to help. All right, Matt, you want to jump into next slide here? So the 5 steps we identified that really have worked well throughout the years, and again, Matt and I have been, and our team, we've been in so many situations where sometimes it's great, but that also means you have high expectations. Sometimes it's a very difficult situation, staff turnover, you're the 7th fundraiser, that kind of thing. But generally, if you can do these 5 steps well, you'll succeed. So demonstrate the impact and wonder of philanthropy. I think it is sometimes easy for us to say, if we get X amount of dollars, we can do Y, but you really do need to be persuasive. You need to figure out what your situation is. Maybe it is helping hire another assistant to help with kids with disabilities. Wow, that's very powerful. Maybe it is providing a scholarship. Maybe it's providing research dollars. You can connect the dots, but you really have to do that internally. A lot of people, I've worked with a lot of finance stuff folks, that they're working hard, they're crunching the numbers, they're making the books work, they're getting payroll done, and they don't have the opportunity to find out what the organization is doing with these dollars. They see the dollars, but they don't see what's going on. So I'd say the first step is make sure that you're aware of what the dollars are doing, and then how are you going to let other people know? It depends on your organization. Discuss the giving experience. This is something that is funny. I never want to get to the point in my career where I feel like I don't have any empathy for people that come into fundraising new, or that are going to the next level. And I understand why it seems odd sometimes that people would give away money. Because people might give away $15, $20, $50, something like that. When people give away large sums, then you have to wrap your head around it and say, why are they doing that? Well, a lot of reasons. But you have to understand, discuss what that giving experience is to the donor, but also the process. Oh, well, they came to our website, they met such and such, she was a great doc and they're going to give. Or, he came to this event, or he was taught by this teacher. Discuss that giving experience with folks and make it real for them. The third part is explain the process of donor engagement. Again, it can sometimes be, you don't want to kill people with details, but sometimes people do want to know the details. Sometimes you talk to somebody that is working with IT and says, I don't get, how do you guys take these dollars, and why did that person give $100,000 here? Or why did that person leave a bequest intention here? Don't underestimate the complexity of what we do. Sometimes, and sometimes I can fall in that habit. To me, fundraising is sort of like falling off a log, but at the same time, I can appreciate how it's also changing. Things are moving digital. I would say a lot of things that worked in the past 15, 20 years ago don't work these days. But then there's some tried and true things that work across it. If you haven't noticed, I use my hands a lot, so there you go. I thought I'd throw that in. I was like, wow, I do use my hands a lot. The fourth is how non-development staff can contribute. This is really where culture of philanthropy pays off. That frontline person that has been working with somebody they think contribute more. Maybe they've talked to somebody and the person has told them, yeah, I contribute, I set up this scholarship, or I paid for this room over here. and then that person contacts you and says, hey, you want to talk to this person, or I found out about this foundation that they, so there's all sorts of things that the non-development staff can be involved in the fundraising process. Or sometimes it's just them thanking a donor, calling up and saying, hey, our program received these funds, and now we can, pay for this extra technology in the classroom. So there's all sorts of things you can do. And then finally, the fifth is really be open about the process. And this is something that throughout our career, I would say 99% of the time, I can share everything that's going on. There's really not that many secrets. There certainly are, I wouldn't say secrets, but confidentiality, right? There's certainly situations where you have confidential information, obviously. But I would say 99% of the time, if somebody wants to know about something, say, I see this donor made this gift to this room. Can you tell me about it? Oh, well, they did. I mean, and that's what transparency builds trust. That's one thing I've learned in life is that I'm a pretty open person, probably to a fault sometimes, but I like to be very open about things. And I think that builds trust in people. I think you can do that with your fundraising, is that we're not doing any deep, dark secrets. We're doing something great. We're doing something very noble. We want you to be part of that process. So be open about the fundraising process. Okay, next slide.
Yeah, I just want to add that, to sum it up, it's like the whys behind fundraising, and it's conveying those whys to your non-fundraising colleagues. Like, how does this, it's not only why, it's the hows, the whats, the wheres, all about fundraising. That's what these 5 steps are really about. It's conveying that to those that aren't involved in fundraising, so they know. And then you've got number 4. And so if you can do 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 5, 4 will come a lot more naturally. And so we're going to take a deep dive into these steps.
Okay, so the key elements here, and to remind everybody, these slides we'll push these out afterwards, so don't worry about taking notes or screenshots or however you're capturing the information. But one thing is, leadership has to believe in philanthropy, and leadership, sometimes it's a board, sometimes it's the VP, sometimes it's the president, sometimes the executive director, the principal, but whoever's running, steering the ship, they really need to believe in it and the donor-centric element. The second thing, it really does take time. It's amazing what you can accomplish. I've been in situations where I just shake my head about how we're going to raise this money, but I just kind of put my nose down and work with others, and you can spread the message, spread the gospel about fundraising. But it does just take time. Everybody learns how to do it. Everybody builds up relationships. It doesn't mean you can't have urgency. It doesn't mean you can't try to accelerate things. But at the end of the day, it really does take time. It's relationship building. It takes work too. It is hard work. I have a lot of empathy, sympathy for our clients. I see what they go through. I see what a lot of development directors are out there feeling, a lot of vice presidents that have these burden in this work. But it's also gratifying, because when you do the work, it'll pay off. You got to have a passion for your organization. I think everybody, donors can feel if you don't feel it. And I don't need to say too much about that, but you really do have to believe in what you're doing. Otherwise, there's probably other stuff for you to do. Don't be spending your time and commitment on something that you don't feel good about. And so you've got to really feel good about that and convey that to others. Open ideas from colleagues. I remember, every time I was in a meeting, and if I was in a leadership position, I tried to make a point of looking around the room and saying, hey, guys, most of the good ideas, in fact, maybe none of the good ideas will come from me. And this can be fundraising staff, but also non-fundraising staff. It's amazing how many folks are really good relationship builders, and they might be hesitant to share those with you. Encourage them. And, it's okay. You don't have to take their ideas, but be open to it. And then try to move from transactional to transformative. This is what we talk about a lot. Is that there's a difference between, and I always wrap it up this way. If a friend says, hey, can you give $25 for a fun run? My kid's going on, sure, you're not going to think too much about it. And if, I'll monitor your school or some cause you believe in, you give $100, you feel good about it, that's great. But if you're going to start thinking about larger gifts of 500,000, 10,000, whatever your capacity is as a donor, you're going to want to have a more of a transformational impact. What is my gift going to do? What is this $1,000 going to do? That's a big part of moving from this transactional to transformative. And then, I think, and then finally, there needs to be an understanding of philanthropy before you engage in the fundraising process. I think that's the overriding of all of this, is that does everybody understand there is a process to this? I've been astounded how many people that I've worked with over the years, especially if they come from an engineering background or something that is very process oriented. Wow, you guys actually have a process in place. It's like, yeah, there are tried and true and best practices here, and they're not perfect and they're not absolutes, but there's some good guidelines. Okay, next slide. Self-assessment. Now this is part we normally do, Matt and I would do, walking around the room, talking to folks, just kind of gauging and what we do best. It's a little bit different for webinar format. So I think we'll just jump into these questions here. And Matt and I, we're going to go back and forth. So it'll be similar to us walking around the room. So visualize us walking around, not maybe not your bedroom or wherever you're at. That's kind of creepy. But instead just walk around through each question. And so if you got a piece of paper, or if you want to just think through these self-assessment, this is a good way to gauge where you're at. So I'll start off the first question, and then Matt can do the next. We'll go back and forth. But are the majority of your non-fundraising staff willing to participate in the fundraising process? So when you think about your organization, and whether it's a staff meeting, and whether it's a staff of 2 or 3 people, or if it's 150, you know, how comfortable are you? How willing are they if you go to them and say, hey, I've got a donor coming in, or maybe more during the COVID days here, I'm going to do a webinar or a Zoom meeting with a donor. I'd love to have you participate and just talk about what you're doing now and what you can do and what some extra funding would do, and allow that donor questions, answer questions or ask questions, that kind of thing. So think through that process, and give yourself a score of 1 to 5, 1 to 10, but just thinking through that, I think you'll find is very helpful in this. Matt, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. So the other one is, do staff understand the fundraising process? And as John talked about, fundraising is a process. And, does your staff understand the difference between major gifts and annual giving, and kind of what goes into your plan and your strategy for fundraising? Or does your staff think this is non-fundraising staff, of course, that we're talking about, or do they think it's some type of black magic and dollars just kind of fall from the sky, or you've got that printing press in the back of the room and you're cranking out money? So that's kind of that. And again, give yourself a score of 1 to 5 and think about, do they really understand how you go about your day-to-day work? Go ahead, John.
This one I love because part of it, I'm lazy. So if I can bring someone in the meeting to do the talking, I don't have to, great. Of course, fundraising, a big chunk of fundraising is just listing. But do staff play a role in fundraising teams? If somebody's giving to a particular area, engage that person with that donor. And another saying I have is, relationships should be as deep and broad as possible. It's great. They should know the development director and they should know the ED, but maybe they should also know the program staff person, or the person, or maybe even the finance person. If they've got a complex gift and they're working through pledges and they're working with their financial advisor, maybe the finance person should be part of that team, so they can kind of crank out numbers and give that donor confidence that their dollars are being well spent. So think about who should be on that team. That's a good way of engaging this culture of philanthropy, and it's certainly enhanced. The donors love that when they have a little bit more of a window and they're being treated a little extra special.
Right, the next one is, do staff assist with prospect identification? So this could be, if you're at a school and teachers, no parents, and there's certainly parents that might bubble up that are great prospects and for giving. And would those teachers or other staff or frontline staff of any type that either engage with volunteers or any other potential donors, can you go to them and say, hey, can you tell me more about these people? And that's what we mean by prospect identification. It's not that they're taking their Rolodex or anything, but just as, if you want to know more about something and somebody, and you think there's a staff member knows about them, will they be willing to tell you more about that person and how to connect with them and how to kind of build that relationship with them? That's an identification piece.
The next question is very similar to above. Who should involve? This one's a little different in the fact that maybe you should involve the president or the chair of the board or something like that. Sometimes titles do matter, just because if somebody's going to do a larger gift or a larger engagement or something like that, they want to know where the buck stops. And so that's important to bring.
Yeah, and then staff involved in visioning your case writing, pretty straightforward. Can you get a group of your staff, or staff, non-fundraising staff in your organization to come together and really think about a case or vision in a substantial way.
Stewardship. This is again back to letting donors know where the dollars are spent. Certainly, I wouldn't dismiss plaques and whatnot. That's great. But more often than not, it's just a donor having the opportunity to talk to someone, talk to a nurse or a doctor, talk to a teacher, talk to that program person that actually implemented this, that, and the other. That's very powerful. And so that's part of stewardship, is just giving that communication. And it doesn't always have to be a discussion. Maybe it's just a letter. Maybe it's just an email that says, hey, I just want to thank you. We just implemented this, that, or the other. That's a huge part of cultural philanthropy, is engaging staff members, faculty, whoever in the stewardship.
Great. I'm going to skip this measurement one, and then think about your board and your key volunteers. And do they have realistic expectations when it comes to fundraising? Or are there conversations such as we have to double our goal next year, and you simply don't have that base of prospects to double the goal? So when it comes to fundraising, do you feel your board or key volunteers, there's realistic expectations? So those are just, those are some questions to think about. We're gonna go into more depth on these throughout this morning.
Okay.
I'll jump into this first step here. That sounds good. So the first step is, as John mentioned, is really demonstrating the impact and wonder of philanthropy. And when you think about this and how am I going to, we say this, why do you want to demonstrate the impact and wonder of philanthropy? Well, it's just really important for people to hear and connect with. And I found in my past experiences that if I can demonstrate this to staff, it breaks down a lot of barriers of fundraising. And all of a sudden, fundraising is not this kind of icky thing that they may or not want to be involved in, or that they feel is something that's, you've got to do it, it's this necessary evil, but that you're really bringing joy to people and you're creating this amazing impact. And there is this wonder of philanthropy. And when people are truly engaged in giving, that experience that they feel. And if you can convey that to your staff, it can really make things, it can really open up a lot of things. So how do you do that? Well, one is always talk about impact on giving, and you use every means necessary to do that, every channel, every opportunity you can to talk about how a gift from someone made an impact in your organization and really furthered your mission. It's really important to dispel negative perceptions about fundraising and have leadership talk in the right ways about giving and philanthropy when it comes from leadership, and they're speaking about philanthropy in terms of joy and impact. It's a lot better than, we hustled these people for money. And then having donors speak to your staff is really key, because if they speak from their heart and really tell their story of giving, it can really, again, open things up. And then the last thing is just sharing credit. And if a staff member helped you out, to let them know. So I'm going to attempt to show some videos here. And they really demonstrate kind of that impact of philanthropy and what fundraising means and does. And the reason I show these is because, one, I want to demonstrate that, you can do the same with your staff. These are some pretty slick videos, but don't think of like the slickness of the video, just more think of the message of the video and the message of the impact of philanthropy. So hopefully this worked, and you'll let me know, Nick, if it's
Water. It's life's most basic need. But there's a water crisis in our world right now. Seriously, a crisis. Nearly 1 billion people live without clean drinking water. It's happening all over the world, especially in developing areas of sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia, and Latin America. It's a water crisis because it starts with water. But water affects everything. Education, health, poverty, and especially women and children. Let's look at a family caught in the water crisis. It's likely they live on less than $1 a day. When they're thirsty, They can't just turn on the faucet for a nice cold glass of water. They don't have a faucet. Instead, the women and children go off to collect water. Many walk up to 3 hours a day to the nearest swamp, pond, or river to gather water that's been sitting out in the open, exposed to all kinds of germs. Time spent gathering water is time they can't spend learning to read, write, earn an income, or take care of their family. Some women in sub-Saharan Africa spend more time collecting water than any other activity they do in the day. And the walk isn't just hard, it's dangerous. The women are alone and burdened with 40 pounds of water. Many get hurt. Sometimes they're even attacked. When they make it home, the little water they've collected isn't clean. Some families know their water is contaminated with germs that cause diarrhea, dehydration, even death. But what choice do they have? Kids, especially babies, are affected most by these germs. About every 19 seconds, a mother loses one of her children to a water-related illness. And each day, almost 1 billion people are living this way. Till they get a little help. The water crisis is solvable. There are solutions. Some are brand new and innovative, like water filtration systems. Some are age-old, like drilled or hand-dug wells. These solutions bring clean water much closer to the people who need it. A safe water project near a village restores hours each day to a person's life. This time, it's opportunity. It's freedom to go to school and get an education, to work or start a business, to raise a family. Africa alone could save 40 billion hours each year. That's the entire annual workforce of France. Clean water means less disease. That's less money spent on medicine, which means more money for books and school uniforms. And if the water project is built near a school, it can increase attendance, especially among young girls. The water crisis is vast, but we can solve it. Just $20 can provide one person with access to a clean water project in their village. And this will mean more than clean water. Because water changes everything. Join us.
All right. So, I'm going to show another one here, and it's not this one. So, excuse me. I really want you to think about, what these videos.
What was the first thing you did when you woke up this morning?
More charity for. So that first one was Charity for Water, and they do an amazing job of really conveying the impact of the work and the impact of dollars and how dollars are changing lives. This one is from the Robin Hood Foundation, and it's for a group called Children's Aid, and it's more relevant to what's happening now with the COVID crisis. And as I show these, think about, I'd love to hear from you in the chat room, just, what these videos kind of, how they resonate with you, how they're demonstrating impact, what this kind of in visionary terms. This one's more immediate need, but it's very well stated. And then I'd also love to hear if anybody's using video to really tell their story. Because this is, again, in building cultural philanthropy, these videos demonstrating impact of work are just so critical in how dollars really do equal impact and better lives. So I'll show this.
I'm Phoebe Boyer. I'm the president and CEO of Children's Aid. Children's Aid was started by individuals in New York City who said enough is enough of kids living on the street and living in poverty, and that they were going to stand up and do something. We created the safety net that we take for granted in this city, and I think that's what's a little overwhelming right now, is that safety net is so tenuous. Our families and our children, they are already, prior to Corona, they were already feeling vulnerable. You bring a crisis like this onto that already fragile platform, and it is really overwhelming. I lived through Sandy and I lived through 9/11. It occurred in a tight time frame, in tight places. This is everywhere. We are going to see housing insecurity. We are going to see mental health issues, and we are going to see, I'm sad to say, abuse, right? To prevent those things, we need to be what we are, which is part of the social fabric of this city. I think the thing I'm thinking about most is, how do I make sure that my staff can be there for our clients? Our government contracts are based on performance. If I have a site closed, I have a $6 million a month payroll. For how long do we keep that going? We're sitting in an empty gym in a community center. We could be a food distribution site if I knew I could pay my staff. We need money. I mean, I have no idea whether I'm going to be able to draw down the contracts that let me pay my staff so that they can be here. I mean, I think one of the things that's kept me sane are the select funders who have actually reached out to say, how can we help? Knowing that I could text Emery, Wes, right, the Robin Hood team, and that they'd be there is critical. Your partnership. We need it today in this crisis, and we're going to need it for years to come.
So again, very powerful video. Water charity, water charities, of course, very good at this, and they produce these exceptional videos and messages. This one had a lot of stills. It was done quick. It was probably done very quickly, naturally, and it's not high budget. And I think certainly it's the message, and it's the message that's being conveyed. So again, love to hear what you thought of these videos. If you really felt the impact, and is this something that you can convey, like the dollars equaling impact and advancing mission and supporting the people you serve, to your staff. So that was the positive. How about the negative? And again, if you can take a moment to chat in the chat to tell me what you think or you feel are these negative perceptions. What's negative to you? What are these negative terms that kind of take away from the joy of philanthropy, the impact of philanthropy, the feeling that people get, what philanthropy can do, and any negative terms? The first one that comes to mind is this picture that, just thinking our donors are ATMs. Others are pickpocketing. Let's arm twist. Anybody else think of any? So go ahead and provide that in the chat, if you will.
Looking like one came through, and it's in reference to over asking to harassing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, over asking and can be harassing, or thinking about it that way.
Can I just add something here, Matt? This resonates. I'm probably one of the least confrontational people on the planet, and it's odd that I'm a fundraiser, because you should have fairly thick skin and whatnot. But I'll just say this on the idea of over asking, harassing, is that your fear as a fundraiser might be, gosh, I've done something wrong. Here's a word I've used over the years that's incredibly effective. If I'm having a genuine conversation with somebody, and you can extrapolate that a little to annual giving, it still applies. But the word is a very powerful word I use, and I've used over the years, that just kind of disarms, that potential, diffuses that. And it's just to say, would you ever consider a larger gift? And that puts people in a different psychological space. Rather than me putting you on the spot, say, Matt, can you give us $10,000? Say, and sometimes it's not the amount. Hey, would you ever consider funding this program for the summer? And then that allows them space to say, whoa, I'm not that capable, or yeah, I would. So I would just give that little pointer, a piece of advice for the folks that have a real fear of kind of asking.
Any others out of the nearly 40 on the webinar? Any thoughts?
Yeah, it looks like manipulating came through, and also thinking that they don't really want to support us, and they will be annoyed by asking.
Yeah, manipulating. We're not manipulating. We're helping people realize something better than themselves or create impact. So when you use the word manipulating for for fundraising. That's definitely a negative term. And I'm sorry, what was the other, Nick?
And the other was, let's see here, thinking they don't really want to support us and they'll be annoyed by asking. Also, a couple came through after that.
Yeah. And that happens a lot. But people definitely don't make the decision for the donor, as we always say. And you're giving people an opportunity to give, much more positive way to think about it.
Matt, I'm sorry to chime in. I've just got one more thing that just is a hot button with me, is that people always ask, over the years sometimes, how can you ask people for money? And I've always said, yeah, I'd be a little embarrassed if I was asking, for the Pepperdine Vacation Fund, but it's not that way. I'm actually talking to somebody, we have shared interest. We both believe in X or Y. And I did see on the chat, somebody saying, well, social services, direct aid. If you look at a lot of people's giving, I look at my own personal giving. Yes, I'll give to food bank and social services, but most of my giving goes to long-term benefit. I like funding education and research. I want to see an impact 10 years from now or when I'm dead and gone. And that's just my style. So don't make the false assumption. And like Matt said, he raised a very good point. We all have our own headspace going on. But if we have data, somebody's been giving to us year after year, they clearly have an interest in us. And so that conversation is not about manipulating at all. It's actually about helping them get to do what they want to do. And Matt and I have experienced this, and our partners have time and time again, where somebody makes a large gift and they actually thank the fundraiser. And believe me, I was blown away. They thank us because we gave them the ability to do something great.
Absolutely, yeah. So the next part of demonstrating the impact of philanthropy is that leaders have to demonstrate the impact of philanthropy. And I've worked in organizations where leaders convey this in amazing terms and talk about the impact that's being created through the gift and how it'll help the organization better serve the constituents it serves, and how this donor is really changing the lives of these people and helping it. On the flip side, I've been at organizations where potential donors are talked about as targets, and we got to go after these people, and we got to get them and go for their throat, things like that. Or when somebody makes a big gift and the leader's announcing it, we talked about to the staff is, we really cornered them for this one and put the squeeze on them. Negative terms again. How can we change that to this person was they love our organization. They love what they do. They knew they could make an amazing impact here. So those terms for your staff to hear so much more stronger and powerful. Sharing credit with your colleagues, absolutely essential. That gets them more involved. They helped you with a gift, just if they helped you with a gift in any way, whether they pointed you in the right direction, helped write a proposal, sent a thank you note, what have you. Just make sure they're recognized in that help, and that'll bring them further into this process and make it a better experience for them. And there's, of course, several ways you can do that. I'm going to move on to number 2, and if you have any questions on 1, please go ahead and post in the chat. But 2 is really about the giving experience, and it's really about why people give and why they don't, and how they give, and the feeling, really the feeling they get from it. And then just thinking about how you put yourself in the donor's shoes. As a fundraiser, you should be doing that and thinking about, people and why they give. And as you talk to them about giving, that, you understand the place they're coming from. It's also important that your colleagues as well can recognize that. And sometimes that's about personality or behaviors or what have you. So, I would love to hear from you as the audience, and usually, again, as John said, we'd go around the room and call on people or whatever. But why do you think donors give? Why do people give? A perception is taxes. Well, maybe not. And certainly people give for taxes. They can right now during the COVID crisis and with the CARES Act that just passed. But that's only going to last a year where you can itemize gifts on your tax return. So there's got to be, people are still giving. People were giving last year, even though they might not have been able to itemize gifts. So there's got to be other reasons. And so I'd love to hear from you why people give. And when you think about that, think about how important that is to let your colleagues in fundraising, who are not in fundraising, understand why people give. So I'll give a minute there if anybody has any ideas on why people give. Some of the common ones are, as we said, to make an impact, but there's a lot of, or taxes, but there's a lot of others as well.
I was
It's
just
like
going to add.
yeah, John, go ahead. Sorry about
I
that.
was just going to add. I was looking at the chat line. There's some other elements here too. This one's a little more controversial, but because I have a friend that listens to the webinar and he'll ding me afterwards and say, "John, you're wrong." But people are asking questions about corporate foundation philanthropy. Yes, obviously there's some huge differences, X, Y, and Z. But here's the thing. I totally think that everything we're saying now applies to a large extent with those kind of donations from corporations, foundations, and so forth, because think of them as entities. And at the end of the day, you're not going to, unless it's the federal government, you're probably not going to be talking to some amorphous entity. You are actually going to talk to a person. So regarding the questions about, how does this fit in with sponsorships, corporate foundation, there's a lot of this that applies because every corporation business has their own kind of interest and agenda. Every foundation has their own interest and agenda. Even the federal government. I was on a chat with, or I was on a recording yesterday with the federal government about some big funding for healthcare. And there was a person there and they said that we want to get this, that, and the other accomplished. So I would just reiterate that, again, take a lot of this and so much of it can apply to your corporate foundation work.
Yeah, great point. This is for the individual specific, but there's people behind those foundations and there's people behind those corporations that are deciding, why they're giving and the impact of that giving. So I'm gonna hear from a donor. And I always think it's important to hear from a donor and somebody who's given. And I think it's important for you within your organization to have donors speak about their giving to your staff as well and tell that story. And either that can be video right now, and when we all are not self-quarantine and we can get together in groups, that can be just in person. But let's hear from this donor why he gives.
So I was born in Worcester. I'd call myself a Worcester boy. My father was from England, and when he came over to the United States, met my mother in Rhode Island. They resided in Worcester. And I'm a Highlander, Doherty Highlander, went to Doherty High School, and then went to Worcester State. So I grew up in what I'd call a middle-class family. My father was a baker. My mother worked retail and raised 4 children. As a middle-class family, I didn't want my parents to be in debt any further than they were already going to be. So I chose one school only, and it was Worcester State. And I wanted to have the opportunity to go to a college where I could still work. So I was going to be a full-time student, but I was going to work so I could help pay my way. So when I was at Worcester State, I was a business major, and I guess I would say, like most students, we really didn't know where we were going to go after we graduated. And I can remember that's where I met my wife, Pam. She's a graduate of Worcester State also. And when I was at Worcester State, I met some great teachers. Maureen Stefanini, who was one of my business teachers, and Felix Masterson, who was the head of the business department. And I can remember how hard they pushed me towards my senior year so I could graduate in 4 years. When I think of impact of teachers, I just think it's caring. I think that they believed in us and they wanted to help us, and they found the strengths within you, and those positive influences helped me get through college and graduate on time. If it wasn't for financial aid, I wouldn't have been able to go to college. So for my wife and I, we looked at our lives and being philanthropic and where we wanted to help. And we felt at this stage of young adults' lives being in college, that this was their opportunity to find themselves, as it was for the both of us. And that's the same thing that happened in life with my family. When our baseball bat had a crack in it, we taped it up and put a nail in it. We didn't have the ability to buy a new one. So when I had the chance to have some success in life and give back, I could go home and replace those windows that had the air leaking through them, or the roof that had some drips coming through, the garage doors that wouldn't open up. So when I think of these young students today, the both of us wanted to do the same. So we started a scholarship first at Worcester State, and that was the beginning of giving. And it is a wonderful feeling when you receive a letter each year from a student or someone that wanted to go to college and you were able to help them have that opportunity. It's a warm feeling. If I can mentor people to realize how important it is to have an education and how important and the success that Worcester State gave to me, You can't compare that to anything. And I hope that others will have that same opportunity that I did, and that they'll work hard and they'll get a good education. And I think I know Worcester State will give that to you. So to be able to see someone have a chance to go to college, to be able to fulfill a dream, or to find where their life is going to bring them, there's nothing more fulfilling than that. And in return, I hope that they'll give forward, that they'll help someone the next time. And that's how we can be successful in a university where our alumni give back, and then they influence and help others to be molded into success, and then they give back. And that will keep Worcester State continually moving forward into the future.
So I realize that's higher ed, and most of you are not in higher ed and don't have alumni. But I think the main takeaway from that is that this is somebody, he's really giving back, and he's from his experience. And I think, through all your organizations, donors either have the experience of who you serve and the impact it happens, or it might be directly on them or families or friends or people they know. And that idea of just giving back. And I think that's really important to distill to colleagues who just still might not fully grasp, the philanthropy and this joy of giving back. I'm going to skip this video. It's a great one as well. She's a person just starting out in giving, and she gives to her local Goodwill. But she has a really great story about just how it makes her feel and how it kind of gives her a sense of community and a sense of belonging. And I think that's really important as well during these times. That sense of belonging and sense of building community and helping community. And that's critical right now during our crisis, and that you can give that opportunity to donors, especially if those organizations that feel they shouldn't be asking right now. I think there's a lot of people out there that do want to make a difference and, again, give back. Yeah.
Can I just add, because I've seen the chat line, people sometimes are asking for very specifics. And then also I can anticipate folks that we've had in our career, but that's that organization, that's not me, or that's a big organization, we're small. I will give a great example. I'm going to do a call out to a client of ours. She's done a wonderful job, Laura Larson over at Stride Community Health Center. She had the exact same experience with the donor, where the donor relayed why they're giving a large gift. They talk about a very emotional reason why they're giving to that community health center. So the basics of this is that you do develop that genuine relationship, and it doesn't matter the size. It doesn't matter if your organization had a history of giving. It doesn't matter all this stuff that sometimes we put up as reasons why somebody's not going to give. If they have a genuine connection to your organization, an emotional feel for it, and you can tap into that and you can get them to talk about that and give them the ability to make that impact, you can do it with virtually any organization that's doing good.
Yeah, as the next slide, perfect segue to this slide. And that reminds, in terms of impact, it reminds me of this story that I heard, and it was this this donor, and he's with a business school, and he was a graduate, and he was very involved in the business school, and this is in Texas, and he had made quite a bit of money. He had a company, and they were very successful, and the business school dean wanted him to give to the building and name the building, and she kept asking, will you name the building? Will you name the building? And he kept putting her off and saying no. And lo and behold, he names the cancer center. And the dean came back to him and reads it in the paper and was like, what the heck? I've been asking this guy to name this building for the last 2 years, and he won't do it. And he goes off and names his cancer center. So the dean calls this gentleman up and says, hey, that's great. Congratulations on, naming the cancer center. That's wonderful what you're doing. I'm just interested to know why you chose that. And I've been talking to you about naming the building for years, and you haven't done it. And he said, they asked me to join them in curing cancer, and you're just asking me to name a building. And there you go. So, it is the impact, and people want to make an impact, and they want to make a difference. And right now, people really, really want to make an impact and make a difference. So, it is all about the donor. It's creating this donor-centric experience, and it's understanding where they want to give and where they want to make a difference. And I think you have to ask yourself at your organization, is this the way you look at donors and you interact with donors, that you are taking this donor-centric approach, and really thinking about how they want to make an impact in your organization, and not less than telling them that they need to. So I'll hand it over to John to go through step 3 in demonstrating donor engagement.
So how do you engage donors? I know there's getting a lot of on the chat line saying, be very specific. The problem is, really everything is context. And so if we give you something very specific that'll work for this organization over here with this more experienced staff or these many resources at this much time, it may not work for this person over here. So I apologize if we can't get as granular as you may wish, but I'll try to throw out some examples, and that's what Matt and I have been doing. But again, it circles back to its relationship based, meaning that what is the donor's relationship with your organization? Have they made 5 gifts, 1 gift? Have they known you for years? Have they been a board member? Everyone's different. Respect differences. Again, that's about the engagement. Are they a couple? Is it a business person? Is it, all sorts of things. Various types of gifts. There's so many ways to give. Sometimes it's a major gift, but it's pledged out over years. Sometimes it's smaller gifts. The lifetime value of somebody that gives $500 every year for 10 years is pretty enormous. I think it's $5,000. Anyway, so respect that. Affinity to the organization. People have different passions, interests. And so somebody may be giving to a school over here and a food bank at the same time. And they may have a higher affinity with one or the other. It doesn't mean they ignore the other. Time commitment of giving. This is incredibly variable. I've worked with business people that, a woman steps down from running a company, she's got a little more time, she's going to get more focused on board work, or vice versa. She's just taking over company, she used to volunteer more, or vice versa. He was doing this. The people, everybody's going to have a different level of time commitment. And I'm a little annoyed sometimes when boards or volunteer organizations want to say everybody gives X amount of hours. Sometimes people can't give as many hours, but the hours they do give are going to be are going to be vital. Okay, next slide. Demonstrating, this is sometimes an exercise we do with the group, but when we give, this relationship based, and when you ask, so what can I do with my organization? How is the relationship between the donor and my organization? Well, we'll start with the top. The first point is staff members. What is their staff interaction? Sometimes it's board work with somebody that manages the board, the executive director, or sometimes even, the assistant, the executive director. Sometimes it's the program person. Sometimes it's you, the development director, if you are a development director. Other times it's peer. People sometimes join boards together or volunteer together or make donations together. So who's their peer? And the third thing would be organizational leadership, kind of classic. Is it the chancellor, or is it the executive director, or is it the director, the coordinator of this program? It doesn't matter, but who is going to be the person they interact with that really kind of leads the organization? And sometimes it's also a group. It could be 2 or 3 key people in governments. Development officer, a lot of times it is the development officer, because sometimes the development officer knows the broadest kind of view of the organization, because they interact with all parts of it, from finance to HR to you name it. Okay, next slide. I want to make sure respect time. We're at about 10 minutes after, so I may go through these pretty quickly. That way Matt can get to his part and we can finish up. But I'll be real brief here. Information overload is currently happening. You can find out so much about donors by checking out our Facebook page, checking out their company's website, all sorts of things. Read news reports, put in quotations their name, and especially if they're in a business or foundation work. There's all sorts of ways that you can figure out where that person stands on your organization. It's incredible. And I would just caution you that you can go down a rabbit hole. Let me end this. The best research tool is a face-to-face visit. So it doesn't mean you can't do a lot, and you can go loaded with some really good questions. And I've always been very forthcoming. I'll say to people, hey, I Googled you and I saw this article you wrote. I thought it was really interesting. People are flattered. So don't be put off, or don't worry about doing some kind of research on them. Usually people appreciate you doing your homework. Okay, next slide.
Jump in here?
I'm sorry?
You may jump in here?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. So this is really, this is just the process, and that it's really important for your staff to understand there's all different levels of donors. It takes time, especially for major gifts. It can take up to 18 months or 24 months to secure a major gift. And that kind of donors go through a life cycle. They might start off entering your organization as a volunteer, and then they're involved in an event and they're giving regularly as annual giving, or they're in a club or society. But this just really isn't. I find it valuable to show non-fundraising staff this funnel, just that one, it's a process. One, it takes time. And we have to engage people at all different levels. It takes a lot of touch points to engage and keep people engaged. And that's why it may look like there's over asking taking place or something like that, but it's really about engagement and giving people opportunities to give. And then I'll jump into 4 and just about, different ways that staff can be involved in fundraising. So at this point, you've taught people, about philanthropy and the impact of philanthropy and the joy of giving and kind of the process that takes place in giving. Now it's time to think about, where people can be involved in the fundraising process within your organization. And the main component is it's not about asking, and they don't have to be on the front lines asking people for money. There's a lot of ways they can be involved in helping to identify and qualify potential donors, helping to build that fundraising vision, really working on your case, building donor relationships, so they're in the background, helping to bring those relationships along, helping you as a fundraiser bring those relationships along. And some do ask. I don't have a lot of staff ask. I never, we don't suggest that or recommend that. It's usually up to the fundraiser and the leader of the organization to be making those asks. And then finally, stewardship and being involved in stewardship. So really key components. But before asking people to be involved, it's really important to know who they are. So you kind of have the right seats on the right bus in terms of people involved in the fundraising process, and whether, based on their personality, and this is a DISC assessment personality, but there's a lot of other personality tests you can do. But think about, their roles and how busy they are and what's going on in their life, what they like to do, what they don't like to do, and just where they can be involved. And then you can think about, oh, well, this person might be better in building relationships. They're extrovert and really, have always in a relationship building, or this person may prefer stewardship and just thanking donors, and that's more for them. So think about that as you think about engaging your staff in fundraising, just their personality and kind of where they are in the organization, what their role is, and their capabilities and how much time they have as you ask them. This is just vision creation and thinking about, this is one of those where how staff can be involved in the vision and creating the vision for the organization and being part of that, thinking about the case and building the case. And there's always those great writers or those very creative thinkers, and there's people that know the impact of the organization well. And then the second one is, are there people in your organization that can help you look at lists of donors or a donor? And I don't, when you present a list of donors, confidentiality, of course, is very important. But they may, depending on your organization, there might be staff members that really understand, why people are involved and why they're engaged and connected to your organization. Like, what's their life story? Why do they give every year? Were they involved in some way? Was a friend involved, a colleague, what have you? And just assist in understanding, what their motivations are, and even if they'd make an introduction. And this is really important. And if this is a problem at your organization, you're unable to do this, I think you really have to take a step back and think about demonstrating the impact of philanthropy, and also the process that goes into this, that we're not going to, if you identify and help us identify somebody that could give to the organization and build that relationship, it's not going to be a bad experience for them. We're going to make it a good experience. And that's another roadblock that I find my staff don't always get involved in helping fundraisers in identifying donors. And then, building relationships. There's so many ways that people can be involved in building relationships. Everything from just being part of a tour, and I hope you have staff. If you do tours, I hope staff help with tours and they provide those main points. Testimonials, if you're doing testimonials, staff are great for testimonials. But then the more tactical with donors, like following up with emails and saying, check this out if you're interested in knowing what's going on. They could serve on a committee, but many ways that your staff can be involved in fundraising without making that direct ask, without being involved in solicitation. They're just helping to build that relationship with those donors. And that's, again, individual, corporate, and foundation as well. Solicitation, we don't highly recommend staff being involved in solicitation. Sometimes there's not a choice, but staff can certainly be part of the solicitation meeting. They should, if the ask is directly reflective of their program, because staff bring the passion. Your frontline people really do bring that passion of the work and what they're doing and the impact that can take place. And they can help with the proposal, of course, and even follow up after the ask. As fundraisers, your job is to make the ask, so we don't rely on staff too much. But again, they're kind of part of that solicitation process and being involved in multiple ways. And then stewardship. There's a lot of ways people can be involved in stewardship, whether you're doing thankathons and as an audience. I'd love to hear how you're involving staff in stewardship if you are, or how you'd want to involve staff in stewardship. So please note that, if you will. That'd be great to hear from all of you. Just some ideas to get you kicked off. Again, they could be writing thank you notes. They could be giving video testimonials. It's really easy to do on an iPhone. You can get a group together and do a little video shout out. I don't know if any of you are doing that at your organizations, where you get staff together to thank a donor or video. I did that at a staff meeting, and a woman had made a significant gift, so we all had the staff. She was actually, this was a while ago, she was in the hospital, and so we sent her a good get well message over just an iPhone. It was great. It was really well done and very meaningful. So please go ahead and chime in if you could on where you see your non-fundraising staff helping with thanking donors with that donor recognition.
Yeah, I would just also add to that, Matt, on the stewardship front. A lot of times people think they overthink it, and what Matt said was completely true. It's just simple, to the point, and authentic overrides almost everything. And it doesn't matter the size of your organization. Everybody can afford to buy a nice card and write something in there. Everybody can forward a thoughtful article somebody would appreciate. And I think it's the development person's job, though, to tee them up and appreciate the fact that, yes, people are busy, but everybody can, if you go to their door, well, nowadays, if you send them an email and say, hey, here's something I read about your program that's really taking off. I know this donor helped fund it. Do you mind emailing them and just thanking them? Everybody can take 5 minutes out of their day to do that. And I've yet to hear a program staff or anybody that, as busy as they are, a doc, nurse, not be willing to do that if you have a relationship with them too. A lot of this has predicated that you're not just like every relationship, you're not just showing up at their doorstep wanting something. Hopefully you showed up to their doorstep or emailed them, introduced yourself, offered to be helped to them first, and then later on you can go back to them and ask them for help with something.
Yeah. And the last step is really opening up about the fundraising process. And I think that's critical. If you want people's buy-in and you want them to help you and you want to build a culture of philanthropy at your organization, they really have to understand your work and what you do. And that this isn't some type of, mystery and dollars fall from the sky. There's a process, it's relationship building, and you do all these different things to engage people and bring them into the organization to build relationships. It's organized, it's strategic, and it's long-term. So that's really key. So I think, if you have the opportunity to get before your staff and just give a very high-level overview of this is how we fundraise, this is how it takes place, this is how we engage people in the organization, and this is how we bring them in and build better relationships. And so we've done those trainings before with organizations, and they're very effective. And then from that, you start to tell if people want to be involved and really help out with fundraising. And you can even do some breakout sessions to understand this is where exactly they want to be involved in fundraising. And as John said, you start building that team of fundraisers throughout your staff. So I want to I cannot see the chat, but it sounds like there's some questions. Should we jump in there? Or anybody want to ask any questions on things we've covered? And how
Yeah, feel free to type it in.
Question screen.
Sorry to cut you off there, Matt. Yeah, feel free to chime in with any questions. We'll keep an eye on that. I know I had one up from a little while ago, Matt and John, so you might have covered it, but I'd love to recap if anything. A question from very earlier was how do you get a buy-in at every level of your organization and how to coach people in relationship building. So two separate questions there.
I I'll cover buy-in if you want to do relationship building, John.
Sure.
You know, so you may not, depending on the size of your organization and how big it is, you might not get buy-in from everybody. I think the key is to get buy-in from some main people, you know, that can really help you. And that can be kind of your go-to folks, the leaders, so to speak, within your organization, or leaders that can help you with fundraising. So getting buy-in from the top, from bottom to top, or whatever, or you know, all the way across, is pretty difficult. So I think it's those important people. But again, just, you know, demonstrating that impact of philanthropy in a very positive way, and the impact that it creates. And then people understanding how, if they're involved in fundraising and thinking about vision and mission and the programs that they work on, the difference that they can make by engaging donors and engaging you as the fundraiser, if you're the fundraiser, and how they can take that along.
Yeah, I would just say, add to everything Matt said, is that, you know, set your expectations. You're not going to get across the board. Not everybody's going to be enamored and excited about fundraising, but there will be a group. And then out of that group that is interested and excited, always think about, you know, what can you provide to them? Meaning, you know, maybe they're a very technical person and they'd be interested in finding out, how do you relationship build? And you can find that need. Or maybe they're really good relationship builder, but you need to help them technical. Like every relationship, you've got to base it on a mutual interest. And also, when I say mutual interest, meaning you're interested in their work too. Every time I've, you know, been part of an organization and I see something that somebody else is doing that I think is cool, and whether I can do it or not, the physics department, you know, doing something amazing I could never do, you know, shoot them an email and say, hey, I really thought this was interesting. Just that step by step, it is amazing how those little things add up. And it's just rapport building. It really is building a genuine rapport with people. Don't overthink that, but don't dismiss it either.
Yeah, and I think, you know, at the beginning of this presentation, we mentioned you have to have a passion for an organization. And if you have passion, you're really demonstrating that passion for the work that's taking place. That helps with that connection with your colleagues and the work that they're doing, and asking them about the work they're doing and the impact of that work, and really drawing that out.
Yeah. I mean, Matt and I and our colleagues, we have genuine interest in what our clients are doing. It's changing the world. It's fascinating. And anytime you take an interest in somebody else's work, they're going to take an interest in what you do. And so that would be my suggestion. Nick, do we have any other questions?
Nothing yet, but I would love to hear from everyone. So feel free to type in that chat function if there's anything on your mind. We'll keep an eye on in this next minute or so.
I want to talk briefly about sponsorships, corporate foundation, and Matt, jump in too after I kind of do my spiel, because I think a lot of folks are going to say, okay, great, individuals, got that covered. What about corporate foundations, sponsorship, that whole ball of wax? I said earlier that these are very similar. I still say that. It is finding out what is the interest of that entity. Again, it could be a small family foundation that wants to support the arts. It could be a large corporation that really wants to have a bigger, more community-oriented footprint. You know, you can fill in the check boxes and then figure out how you build that relationship. And I think if you take the steps you've learned here on building those relationships and that culture of philanthropy, so also helping other staff members understand what that foundation is trying to achieve. You know, what does Daniel's Fund want from us? And you can help translate that for them. Then, you know, it's no longer this big amorphous entity. Then it makes sense, and you can build that culture of philanthropy with how you reach out to corporate foundation X, Y, and Z. Matt, you want to add to that?
No, that was very well stated. I mean, yeah, you know, I agree. It's, corporations want to make an impact in this world. I'll speak specifically to corporations, but um, especially now, you've got many companies, uh, I think, expressing their desire to help out in the community and make an impact in the community. It's just really important to connect those threads, connect those dots to what you're doing at your organization and how that connects to the company and creating, it's creating that bigger experience. I think with corporations, if you're just looking for a gala sponsorship or something like that, and that's more on the transactional side, and that's what you'll get. But I think if you can get a group to really think deeply within your organization about how a company can make impact within your organization on the long term and create a long-term relationship, it will, end up being a much bigger, more meaningful investment than just say like a sponsorship for an event or something like that. So I think it does go to thinking way beyond like the sponsorship, so to speak, to more of the partnership.
Yeah. And then I'll just finish up with just respect the differences. Every business corporation entity is different. A law firm looks different with partnerships than a manufacturing group, a privately held versus a public. So just understand, too many times I think I've made this mistake of just sending out kind of, or cookie cutting an ask and not respecting the fact that people, businesses, foundations, all are different sizes and different flavors and shapes,
Yeah.
So, Nick, I think we're just about toward the end. I want to make sure we get everybody off on time here. My clock says about 10:26. If we have any other questions, I'm happy to wrap up, and I'll just finish up and then let Matt finish up too. But I wanted to make another plug for Colorado Nonprofit Association. If you're not a member, definitely join. It is well worth membership. It is well worth staying informed, not just for trainings, but just making genuine connections with other fundraising professionals. So I also want to thank Colorado Nonprofit Association for having Matt and I do this training. We really appreciate it. It's a huge benefit to us. We get a read of what's going on, and it helps us stay connected with the nonprofit community. So thank you, Nick.
Thank you so much. I'll let you guys wrap up for sure here, but I definitely want to thank everyone who joined in today. Much appreciated. And thank you, John and Matt, for your expertise and just being here with us today. It was much appreciated as well. And thank you for all the comments too. So I'll let you guys wrap up, but thank you all for joining too.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for joining. We really appreciate your comments and your thoughts and your questions. And if you have anything else, and please feel free to reach out to us. You can just visit our site, or we had our LinkedIn profile earlier of how to connect. We'd be happy to talk to you further about building culture, philanthropy, or anything else. We're open. We're doing free webinars right now with the Colorado Nonprofit Association every Friday after this at 12, just on kind of fundraising during the COVID crisis. And it's an open dialogue and conversation.
In Association of Fundraising Professionals for Colorado. That's a good group to join.
Yeah.
And that's another kind of way to stay connected.
Yeah. And again, building culture philanthropy, just remember, it takes a lot of time. It's a lot of work. It doesn't happen overnight. But the real key is to demonstrate that impact that donors make at your organization and really let your colleagues kind of into that. And that'll help. So thank you again for joining us this morning.
Take care.
Thank you all so much. A post-evaluation email will be coming to you. Feel free to respond to that. Any questions you have, that's my email. So feel free to get right back to me there. But yeah, if not, just have a wonderful rest of your day. And Matt and John, thank you again so much. Much appreciated, everyone.
Quite welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Nick. We'll see you. Bye-bye.